Respected lovers of Allah, respected lovers of Sayyidina Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, my honorable brothers and respected sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Allah Jalla Jalaluhu illustrates to us the importance of nikah by practical illustration when the very first nikah that took place was conducted by Allah Jalla Jalaluhu himself. When Adam alayhi salam was in Jannah, he yearned for companionship despite the beauties of Jannah. Adam alayhi salam was yearning for companionship, and Hawa alayhi salam was created. And as soon as she was created, Adam alayhi salam became enthusiastic to go towards her, and Allah Jalla Jalaluhu had him stop. And then Allah Jalla Jalaluhu performed the nikah. The malaika served as the witnesses. There was even a dowry stipulated, and the very first nikah took place in Jannah, illustrating to us the importance of nikah. The functionality of a Muslim society is dependent on nikah. The increase of the ummah is dependent on nikah. Raising the levels of morality is dependent on nikah. Look at those people with the most demanding job requirements, the most demanding missions, were the Anbiya alayhi salam. Their responsibility was hidayah. Their responsibility was their nation. Despite that, every single Nabi who came to earth, despite the responsibilities of their mission, despite the fact that they are protected from sin, despite all of those variables, the Anbiya alayhi salam had all made nikah with the exception of Sayyidina Isa alayhi salam. So every single Nabi made nikah. But when it comes to Sayyidina Isa alayhi salam will return. And when he returns with an important mission. And despite his mission being so important, he needs to slay the Dajjal. He needs to free the people. He plays such an important role before Qiyamah. But despite the importance of his role, Sayyidina Isa alayhi salam, when he comes to earth, Sayyidina Isa alayhi salam will also still get married. The narrations are very detailed in terms of which family he will marry into, in terms of how many children he will have. There are 2 children, by the way, that Sayyidina Isa alayhi salam will have. But it speaks to us about the importance of nikah. There was a group of youngsters having a discussion, and they were enthusiastic about Deen. So the 3 of them were sharing their zeal and their ambitions. So the first one said, my ambition is, I'm going to engage so intensely in ibadah that I will not sleep the entire night. It sounds remarkable, but that's the first one's ambitions. The second one said, I have so much of ambition to fast that I will fast every single day of the year. And that also sounds amazing. And the third one said, I want to be so dedicated to this deen that I won't take out time for marriage, because that will be a distraction from my ibadah. I will only focus on my ibadah and I won't get married. When Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam heard about this conversation, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam called for these 3 young men. And Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam reprimanded them, saying that I sleep a part of the night and I get up and I perform tahajjud for a part of the night. And the best fast is the fast of Dawood alayhi salam, where he fasted on one day and he consumed on the other day, and he fasted on one day and he consumed every second day. Dawood alayhi salam fasted. And then Sayyidina Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam went on and made the statement which links to our discussion. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam said, and I marry women. And you know, in the nikah khutbah there's a statement that is always quoted where it said, فَمَنْ رَاغِبَ عَنْ سُنَّتِي فَلَيْسَ مِنِّي. For that person who turns away from my sunnah, they're not from amongst me. When were those words uttered? Those words were uttered in this circumstance, where Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was commanding these youngsters to stay away from extremism and build a functional life, and a functional life is dependent on marriage. Marriage is an important component of what we consider in Islam to be a functional life. So it should be part of your goals. It should be part of your aspirations to marry. And to marry early should be part of your aspirations. And the reason I mention that is that nikah, as per our prophetic teachings, nikah is considered to be a shield. What is a shield against? It's a shield against lust. It's a shield against temptation. It's a shield against potential sin. So the sooner you shield yourself, when your desires are at its highest, when your hormones are jumping, when a person is having difficulty curtailing himself, at that point he requires the shield. But if his focus is, look, I need to ensure that I get married after my education. I need to get married after I get a job. I need to get married after I make my first million. I need to get married after I have financial stability. Then the time that the shield comes into play is not aligned to the time when the shield is needed. The brothers in this room, young, vibrant, strong, you know how much we need the shield while we're young. And then we pass that period when we actually require the shield. And now comes the time when a person says, now I'm going to get married, but the shield came after so much of sin was already accumulated. May Allah save us and may Allah give us the understanding. So in theory it sounds good, marriage young. But what is the criteria for marriage? So the argument becomes very, very polarized. Where some people say, you need to marry young irrespective. Other people on the other hand say, you need to be capable to get married, and they dismiss the possibility of marrying young. The reality is, if I have to prescribe, it is impossible for me to prescribe an age. But what I can very comfortably prescribe is a criteria. And that criteria is a man should be in the position to fulfill the rights of his wife. So what rights does Sharia secure for the wife? The first right is, a man must be in the position to provide a shelter of her own to her. To provide her own housing to the wife. That's the first right that needs to be secured. The second right that needs to be secured is the man must be able to provide clothing for his wife. Not excessive, not an unnecessary walk-in closet, but enough clothing to cover her body at least. He should be able to provide clothing for her. The third responsibility on the man is he needs to be able to feed her. It is his responsibility to feed her. So those are the primary responsibilities. So I can't attach an age, because in the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, people got married so young that in our age, kids are still playing with toys at that age. And we have to prescribe that age today. We know how incapable people are to fulfill these responsibilities. On the other hand, if we base it on society's norms of maturity, we will be delaying people's marriage. So we need to meet these primary criteria. The secondary criteria includes more things. The secondary criteria, which is of utmost importance as well, is a man needs to be able to see to his wife's physical needs. He needs to be healthy. He needs to be capable. He needs to ensure that she is physically satisfied. Then he needs to meet her with her emotional needs. So he needs to be emotionally mature. Now some would ask, how do you determine emotional maturity? I would say the erraticness of teenagehood. The erraticness. Where one day a person is doing something, the next day he's doing the next. He's not standing for anything consistently. The erraticness of immaturity of teenagehood should come out. And by the point that the stability of maturity sets in, then you can say that person is emotionally mature and he is in a position to provide for her emotional needs. And then the next is, he should be in a position where he's capable of protecting her from harm. Because she's under the care of her father. She leaves the care of her father. Her husband needs to be capable of protecting her from harm. And finally, he should be able to have the ability to facilitate an atmosphere that is conducive to her spiritual growth. Now let me just repeat it. The narrative that I just need to marry young to save myself from fitna, where there's no responsibility on your shoulder, that comes from a narrative of entitlement. In order to reach the point where a person can get married, he needs to be able to provide shelter. He needs to provide clothing. He needs to be able to provide food. He needs to be able to physically satisfy her. He needs to be able to meet her emotional needs. He needs to be able to protect her. And he needs to create an atmosphere which is conducive for her spiritual growth. Now the question that some would say, is, bro, I understand the criteria. But at the moment I'm getting caught up in sin. At the moment we're dating, we're getting caught up in sin. The first step to eradicate entitlement is to identify that you didn't follow the process. Accept that you didn't follow the process. The process of falling in love and investing your emotions and then saying I need to get married, you're breaking the system. The system is you find somebody with kufu, compatibility. You identify that the two of you are now compatible. After you've identified that the two of you are compatible, you put your trust in Allah and you make nikah. Bro, after you make nikah, you fall in love. And that's the right process. But now what happens in a situation where the two are dating and now they say, look here, we want to get married or else we're going to fall into sin? I would first encourage you, meet the requisites. And if you know it would be difficult for you to meet the requisites without falling into sin in the process, then the two need to sit down and have a very mature discussion. The rights that are due to the wife remain, whether she's in love or not. But the only way to work around it is if she consciously says, I absorb you from these responsibilities until you are capable. So you are not in a position to provide my own shelter. So as an interim measure, I'm going to live in the house with your parents. I'm accepting that, but it's your responsibility, but I'm going to absorb you for a while. You're not able to look after me financially. My father will continue, but I'm absorbing you, but eventually you have to work towards that point. That's the only measures we can put in place. But know that that's the result of people not following the process. You don't wear your heart on your sleeve, and anybody who slides into your DM, you go gaga and fall in love for them. You need to be able to follow the process. The process is identify compatibility, identify suitability, and after you make nikah, bro, go to town after that. You can fall in love and give flowers every day. But until that point, follow the process and don't break the process. May Allah give us the understanding. So, taking it from here, right? Now the two come together, they see compatibility, everything seemed good, now they get married. The feeling of in love is a euphoric feeling. It's almost like a high. It's an amazing feeling. May Allah bless us with wives that make us fall in love hard, where it's a beautiful feeling. Where in Arabic they describe it as حُبُّكَ شَيْءٍ يَعْمَى وَيَصِمُّ. Love for something makes you blind and deaf. It's an amazing feeling. Marriage is beautiful. But that euphoric feeling, according to neuroscience, it cannot last for more than 2.5 years. It's a euphoric feeling. It's like a high. That high cannot last for more than 2.5 years. Prove that 2.5 year period ends, and then what? Then it's dependent on two components. One is that's where the test of compatibility shows. And the next is despite how compatible you may be, after that it's a test of how much effort you're willing to make. You know that phrase we say, winners don't quit, quitters don't win? It applies to marriage so precisely. Winners don't quit, quitters don't win. The outlook from the very onset is that if I'm getting married, there is no exit. You see, it should not be a quitter's mindset that, look, I'm going to get married, and if things don't work out, talaq is my avenue to deal with things. That marriage, if a person starts with that mindset, knowing that talaq is an option, bro, I'm sorry to tell you, the chances of it surviving is very slim, because your resilience gets tested over and over and over. So the mindset from the onset is, talaq is not an option. I do not have the option of talaq. It's not even a consideration. I remove it from my vocab. When I sit with the youth, we have weekly classes, I tell them, guys, hand over your power of talaq. Hand it over to me. And now when I hand it over, let me crush it. Because if you know you have that power, you can always consider an exit. But if you create a mindset saying, I'm going to make this work. Winners don't quit, quitters don't win. I'm here in for the long haul. Habibi fi dunya wal akhirah. That's the outset, that's the mindset I'm coming in with. Now, say it doesn't work. Now that it doesn't work, talaq is never a weapon. You see, you ever wondered, why does the Sharia give the power of talaq to a man and not to a lady? Why does Sharia give the power of talaq to a man and not to a lady? Because the Sharia's expectation of the man is that he should be emotionally grounded. He shouldn't be erratic. He shouldn't act on his emotions. He should rise above his emotions. That's why the Sharia gives the right of talaq to a man. So now that you've been entrusted, if your flex against your wife in an argument is the fact that I'll divorce you, you're not worthy of calling yourself a man. If every time things go wrong, you tell her, I will divorce you, you'll go back to your father, you're not worthy of being called a man. So talaq is not a weapon to use against your wife. Talaq is a tool for the annulment of a marriage. So how should the process go? Two parties realize, look, we're not compatible. One example, there was a Sahabi who is almost described as the adopted son of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Zayd bin Thabit radiallahu anhu. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam did the matchmaking between Zayd radiallahu anhu and Zainab bint Jahsh radiallahu anha, was the cousin of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam knew them well. He did the matchmaking sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That marriage reached a point where they seen that they weren't compatible. Now that they weren't compatible, the marriage arranged by the greatest of Allah's creation, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that marriage ended in a divorce. So there may be a possibility that the two are not working out. The first important step is, without emotion, the two realistically bring in a neutral party. This neutral party rises above the pettiness, and this neutral party does an assessment of the situation. This neutral party is endeavoring to save the marriage. Let me tell you why it's so important to save the marriage. Shaitan has his throne on the sea. And it's a hadith in Tirmidhi, where Shaitan has his throne on the sea. And every day he gathers the shayateen, his subordinates. And then he gives them a pep talk to motivate them to cause chaos on earth. And by the evening they return to him with their reports. The one will give one report, the other will give another report, and no reports excite the shaitan. Until finally one says, I managed to cause tension in a marriage between husband and wife. And shaitan comes down from his throne. He embraces him, he lauds him, he celebrates him, because of the pleasure that shaitan gets in the dissolving of a marriage, because then people prop their shield against the efforts of shaitan. So this neutral party's goal is to mediate and bring the parties together. But this neutral party's role is also to be realistic and say, look here guys, the two of you are not going to make it. There's a possibility that you are going to destroy your akhirah by being together, because the two of you are going to be nasty. There's a possibility that you won't enjoy your life and it will also affect your akhirah. So realistically speaking, the two of you now need to dissolve. Now that they decide to dissolve, brothers, there is a lot of misconceptions. And if you don't understand what I'm about to say now, you don't yet have your license for marriage. Understanding what I'm about to say now is your license. It's your competency for marriage. What is it? You do not require 3 talaqs to terminate a marriage. Please allow this to settle in. The termination of a marriage is not dependent on 3 talaqs. Guys, please repeat after me. The termination of a marriage is not dependent on 3 talaqs. I wish you repeated after me. So there is 3 ways to terminate a marriage. One is the haram way, the other is the acceptable way, and the other is the preferred way. So the haram way to terminate a marriage. Firstly, whilst a woman is experiencing her menses, to issue talaq is haram. Any guesses why? Why, Ali? Any guesses? Anybody? What? Good thinking, but that's not the reason. The bride is not getting action, is not thinking straight. As simple as that. The bride is not getting action, is not thinking straight. So it's haram to issue talaq while she's experiencing her monthly cycle. The second thing which makes this one haram is, now say he's in the clean period, and if he issues 3 talaqs at one go, that is haram and a grave sin in the sight of Allah. So if a man says talaq, 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 it's a grave sin. It's haram and it's wrong. And the third component that is impermissible is during her clean period, if a man issues talaq while during that period they were intimate. They were intimate during that period and then he issues talaq. For lack of better word, he's a bit of a dog to do that during that period because he benefited and now he's issuing talaq. So during a clean period where there was no action, during a clean period they were not intimate. Now during that period, if a man issues 3 talaqs, that is the haram method, the marriage is terminated, there's no way to salvage that marriage. Let's look at the permissible method. The permissible method is a person during the clean period where he wasn't intimate, he issues 1 talaq. As he issues 1 talaq, she enters into the state of iddat. She experiences her period, then she becomes clean again, he issues a 2nd talaq. Then she experiences her period, when she becomes clean again, he issues the 3rd talaq. Eventually when she comes out of the state of iddat, that marriage is terminated, the 2 of them can go their own way. But the best way as per the Sharia is when a man and woman after mediation realize that there's no hope for this marriage, all that is required with a clear mind and a calculated decision, rising above emotions, is he issues just 1 talaq during a clean period where there was no intimacy. As he issues the 1 talaq, she enters into the state of iddat. That iddat lasts for 3 clean cycles. During that time, if the 2 of them decide, let's reconcile, let's come together, all that is required is he needs to say to her, I take you back as my wife. If the iddat period terminates, she's then out of his marriage. She can marry someone else. He can marry someone else. But it allows room that if many years later, or even just months later, or even a day after her iddat, if they realize, look, sleeping alone is not lekker. Chowing alone is not lekker. Let's come back together. All that is required after the iddah is they need to redo their nikah and the 2 are back together again. Remember, O youth of Islam, O young men, the Sharia always has your best interest. And the important principle is, if you want to secure your best interest, firstly, hasten towards nikah, but meet the criteria. Once you've met the criteria, remove the words of talaq from your vocabulary. And if you come to a situation where the marriage needs to be terminated, 1 talaq is sufficient. Please remember that. I'm not going to ask you to repeat after me because you guys are weak. 1 talaq is sufficient for the termination of the nikah. May Allah give us the understanding. Wa akhiru da'wana alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Brothers, 5 minutes for sunnah. Please don't forget the plight of our believers in Gaza. They are literally dying out of hunger. It's a devastating situation that we should never become immune